The ground beneath our feet holds more stories than we can imagine. During 6 years of global conflict, from 1939 to 1945, the world didn't just fight on the surface. It went underground, like secret bunkers were dug, command centers were buried, entire factories were hidden inside mountains. People sought refuge in cellars and secret annexes. These places were built for strategy, for survival, for secrecy. They were the nerve centers of war and the last hope for the hunted. Today, many of these places are quiet. The concrete is cold, the air is still, but they are not gone. You can walk through the same corridors where generals made decisions that changed the world. You can stand in the small rooms where families hid, praying for silence. You can touch the walls of massive submarine pens that were meant to be indestructible. These are not just ruins. They are classrooms, they are memorials, they are stark reminders of a time when the world held its breath. What was it really like to live and work in total secrecy deep underground? What marvels of engineering were accomplished under immense pressure and with limited resources? And what secrets do these silent structures still keep? Many of them have been open to the public, offering a direct connection to the past. They let us step out of our world and into a concrete echo of another time. Number 20. Could a dictator ever truly feel safe? In Rome, there's a beautiful park called Villa Torlonia. It has elegant buildings and lush gardens. For 20 years, it was the home of Italy's leader, Benito Mussolini. But beneath the pleasant surface, a different story was being written in concrete and steel. A fear was growing. As the war turned against him and his allies, the threat of air raids on Rome became real. A leader needs to project strength, but he also needs to survive, so he started building. The first shelter, constructed in 1940, was simple. The family's wine cellar was adapted, its walls reinforced with concrete. It was a quick fix, a gesture. But as the war intensified, it was clearly not enough. A second bunker was built under another building on the estate. This one was more serious. It was dug deeper with 4-foot thick concrete walls, steel doors, and an air filtration system to protect against gas attacks. It was a fortress in miniature, connected to the house by an underground passage, but even that didn't soothe the growing paranoia. In late 1942, work began on a third, ultimate bunker. This was a massive project. It was constructed in the shape of a cross, dug 20 feet underground and encased in an enormous shell of reinforced concrete 12 feet thick. It was designed to withstand the heaviest bombs of the era. The construction was frantic. It was a race against time. The irony is, he never got to use it. Allied forces bombed Rome in July 1943. Shortly after, Mussolini was arrested and removed from power. The bunker was still unfinished. The armored doors had not yet been installed. The final ventilation and sanitation systems were not in place. Today, you can tour these bunkers. You see the progression from a simple cellar to a high-tech fortress. You walk through the dark, damp corridors and see the unfinished concrete of the final shelter. It feels like a monument to paranoia, of a leader who controlled a nation could not control the skies above his own home. He poured immense resources into protecting himself while the country he led was falling apart. The historian and biographer Nicholas Farrell, in works like Mussolini, A New Life, has detailed the complex psychology of a man who built a cult of personality, but was, in the end, consumed by fear for his own safety. What specific intelligence prompted the escalating frantic pace of the final bunker's construction? And if he had managed to use it, who were the few chosen individuals on the list to be saved alongside him in the event of a catastrophic attack? Number 19, where does justice go to die? South of Rome, the Ardeatine Caves are not a bunker or a hideout in the traditional sense. Nobody hid here to survive. Instead, this was a place where a terrible secret was buried. It was a network of ancient tunnels, a former quarry. In March 1944, Rome was under German occupation. A local resistance group attacked a column of SS police, killing 33 of them. The response from the military command in Rome was swift and brutal. It was decided that for every German killed, 10 Italians would be executed. The reprisal had to be done quickly and secretly. The occupying forces rounded up prisoners. They took them from jails and from the streets. The victims were a mix of political prisoners, captured resistance fighters, and Jewish people who had been detained. In total, 335 men and boys were taken. They were chosen almost at random to meet the grim quota. They were trucked to the Ardeatine Caves, led deep inside, and systematically killed. After the massacre, military engineers used explosives to seal the entrances to the caves, hoping to hide the crime forever. But secrets like this don't stay buried. The site was discovered after the Allied liberation of Rome just a few months later. The story came out, it became a symbol of the brutality of the occupation. The historian Robert Katz wrote a detailed account in his book Death in Rome, which meticulously pieced together the events leading to the massacre and the subsequent cover-up. The book itself became controversial, leading to legal battles because it laid bare the chain of command and the difficult questions of responsibility. Visiting the Ardeatine Caves today is a somber experience. It is now a national memorial. You walk through the dark tunnels to the place of the execution. The air is heavy. It's a place of profound silence and grief. It serves as a powerful reminder that some of the war's most important hidden places were not for living, but for dying. They were not shelters, but tombs. It shows how secrecy was used, not just for strategic advantage, but to conceal crimes against humanity. The questions that remain are chilling. We know the main perpetrators, but how many lower-level soldiers and officials were involved in the logistics, the transport, the guarding, the sealing of the caves, and simply melted back into society after the war? Are there undiscovered mass graves in other occupied territories, sealed with the same desperate hope of hiding a crime? And most disturbingly, how many people in Rome knew something was happening at the caves, but were too terrified to speak? Number 18, can a simple watchmaker's shop defy an empire? On a quiet street corner in Haarlem, Netherlands, is a small house with a watchmaker's shop on the ground floor. For generations, the Ten Boom family lived here. They were devout Christians known for their kindness and integrity. When the German occupation began and the persecution of the Jewish population started, the family, led by Corrie ten Boom, knew they could not stand by and do nothing. Their faith demanded action. Their house became a center of the local resistance. It became a hiding place. They built a secret room. It was not grand or sophisticated. It was hidden behind a false wall in Corey's own bedroom. The space was tiny, no bigger than a small wardrobe. To enter, you had to crawl through a sliding panel at the bottom of a linen closet. Inside, it was dark and cramped. There was no bathroom, no window. It could hold up to 6 people standing shoulder to shoulder. This small hidden space became a refuge for Jews and members of the resistance who were being hunted by the authorities. Corrie and her sister Betsy organized a network that saved an estimated 800 lives. The system was clever. If soldiers came to search the house, a warning signal would allow those in hiding to scramble into the secret room in under a minute. The family would drill visitors to practice. In her powerful book, The Hiding Place, Corrie ten Boom later described the constant fear, the close calls, and the unwavering faith that guided their actions. But on February 28, 1944, they were betrayed. An informant told the authorities about their activities. The house was raided. The family and their allies were arrested. The 6 people hidden in the secret room at the time of the raid, 2 Jewish men, 2 Jewish women, and 2 resistance workers, remained completely still and silent. The Gestapo searched the house for hours, but could not find the hiding place. The soldiers kept the house under guard, waiting for the hidden people to emerge. Miraculously, after 2 days, the resistance managed to get them out. The Ten Boom family, however, paid a heavy price. Corrie, her father, and her sister were all sent to concentration camps. Only Corrie survived. Today, the house is a museum. You can see the watch shop as it was. You can go up to Corrie's bedroom, open the closet, and peer into the tiny, dark space that was the difference between life and death. It's an intimate and powerful experience. It shows that bunkers and hideouts were not just for soldiers and governments. They were for ordinary people who made extraordinary choices, yet mysteries linger. The identity of the Dutch informant who betrayed the Ten Booms has never been conclusively proven, despite years of investigation. How extensive was their resistance network, and are there still unsung heroes from that circle whose stories have never been told? And perhaps the most unsettling question, how many other hiding places were there in homes across Europe that were never discovered, their secrets and fates lost to time? Number 17, what happens when a mountain becomes a fortress? In southeastern France, there is a rugged, windswept limestone plateau called the Vercors. It's a natural fortress surrounded by deep gorges and steep cliffs. During the war, this isolated region became a symbol of resistance. Its geography made it an ideal hideout for those fighting against the German occupation and the collaborationist Vichy regime. It became a sanctuary and a stronghold for the French resistance known as the Maquis. Starting in 1942, young men fleeing forced labor drafts and seasoned resistance fighters began to gather in the Vercors. They used the dense forests, hidden caves, and remote villages as their base of operations. The plateau was not a single bunker, but a living, breathing hideout on a massive scale. In June 1944, following the D-Day landings in Normandy, the resistance fighters of the Vercors rose up. They declared the Free Republic of the Vercors a liberated zone in the heart of occupied France. It was a bold and defiant act. They hoped for Allied support, for weapons and supplies to be parachuted in, turning their mountain fortress into a major base to harass the German army from behind the lines. For a few weeks, it was a success. The resistance fighters, numbering several thousand, attacked German convoys and secured the area. But they were isolated. The Allied support they desperately needed was slow to arrive and insufficient. The German command could not tolerate such a rebellion. They launched a massive counterattack. Over 10,000 soldiers, including specialized mountain troops and airborne units, were sent to crush the Vercors Republic. They used gliders to land troops directly on the plateau, bypassing the difficult mountain passes. The battle was brutal and one-sided. The lightly armed Maquis were no match for the heavily armed, experienced German soldiers. The resistance was crushed. The aftermath was horrific. The occupying forces carried out brutal reprisals against the fighters and the civilian population who had supported them. And villages were burned. Over 600 resistance fighters and 200 civilians were killed. The Vercors became a martyr city, a symbol of both heroic defiance and tragic sacrifice. The historian Paddy Ashdown, in his book The Cruel Victory, gives a harrowing account of the battle and its political context, exploring why the promised Allied help never fully materialized. Today, the Vercors is a regional park. You can drive the winding roads, hike the trails, and visit the villages that were rebuilt after the war. There is a memorial to resistance in WWII and Vercors, a village that was almost completely destroyed. It tells the story of the Maquis and their tragic fight. The landscape itself is the monument. Every cave, every forest, every remote farmstead was part of this vast natural hideout. But the story is not fully closed. There are still debates among historians about the strategic decisions made by both the resistance leadership and the Allied command. Was the uprising premature? Could more have been done to support them? The personal stories of many of the fighters are lost, their identities unknown. And a haunting question remains how many small hidden weapon caches and secret documents were stashed in the caves and forests of the Vercors, still waiting to be discovered. Number 16, can you hide an entire air force inside a mountain? In a remote corner of what is now Croatia, near the border with Bosnia and Herzegovina, lies a relic that feels like it's from a science fiction movie. It's the Zeljava Air Base, code-named Object 505. While its main construction and use were during the Cold War by Yugoslavia, its entire concept is a direct lesson learned from the Second World War. The war proved that air bases were incredibly vulnerable to enemy bombing. The Yugoslav leadership, determined to maintain neutrality and defend their nation, took that lesson to the extreme. They decided to build an airbase that was virtually indestructible. The solution was to put it inside a mountain. Construction began in 1948 and took 2 decades to complete. The scale is almost unbelievable. They hollowed out the base of Chesavica Mountain, creating a network of tunnels large enough to house, arm, and maintain several squadrons of fighter jets. There were 4 entrances, sealed by 100-ton pressurized blast doors. Inside, there was a complete self-sustaining world. It had its own power generators, air filtration systems, water sources, barracks for over 1,000 personnel, a hospital, and command centers. The base could withstand a direct hit from a 20-kiloton nuclear bomb, roughly the size of the one dropped on Nagasaki. The jets would take off from runways located just outside the mountain entrances. They could land, taxi directly into the mountain, be refueled, rearmed, and sent back out, all while protected from any conceivable attack. It was the ultimate military hideout, a massive, secret complex designed to ensure the survival of their air force. The project was one of the largest and most expensive military construction projects in Europe. Its existence was a closely guarded secret for many years. The base was used throughout the Cold War, but its end was violent. During the Yugoslav wars in the early 1990s, the retreating Yugoslav National Army destroyed the base to prevent it from falling into the hands of their enemies. They packed the tunnels with explosives and detonated them. The resulting explosions were so massive they caused seismic shocks in the nearby town and created a plume of smoke that rose for miles. Today, Zeljava is an eerie, dangerous ruin. The entrances are shattered concrete husks. The surrounding area is littered with unexploded landmines. Urban explorers and military history enthusiasts venture inside, but it's a risky endeavor. The tunnels are collapsing, filled with toxic materials, and the legacy of the war remains. It stands as a powerful, concrete example of how the lessons of 1939 to 1945, specifically the devastating power of air raids, drove military architecture for the next 50 years. The research of military historians on Cold War strategy often points back to the vulnerabilities exposed in the earlier global conflict as the primary driver for such super bunker projects. And yet, some things remain unknown. Given the extreme secrecy of the project, are there still sealed off sections or hidden command bunkers within the complex that were not destroyed? What classified technologies or strategic plans were housed there that have never been declassified? And how many similar, though perhaps smaller, mountain hideouts were built by other nations during the Cold War? Their location's still a secret today. Number 15. What if buildings fought back? Imagine looking at a city skyline and seeing not just apartments and offices, but massive windowless towers of solid concrete. During the war, this became a reality in cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and Vienna. These were the flak towers, or Flakturme. They were a unique and formidable type of bunker, a direct response to the devastating Allied bombing campaigns against German cities. They were designed to serve two purposes at once: active defense and passive protection. On the top of these gigantic structures were huge anti-aircraft guns capable of firing thousands of shells per minute into the sky to bring down enemy bombers. They were high-tech fortresses with radar dishes to detect incoming planes and complex targeting equipment. But their second function was just as important. The interiors of these towers were massive public air raid shelters. Each tower could hold tens of thousands of civilians during a bombing raid. The walls were made of reinforced concrete up to 12 feet thick. They were considered invincible to the bombs of that era. There were two types of towers, usually built in pairs. The G Tower, or Gefsturm, combat tower, was the huge gun platform. The L Tower, or Leturm lead tower, was the smaller command tower, equipped with the primary radar and guidance systems. Inside, they were like small vertical cities. They had their own power and water supplies, a hospital, and rooms for civilians to wait out the raids. They were a symbol of the total war concept, where the line between the military front and the home front had been completely erased. The civilian population was now living inside the fortifications. The construction of these towers, as documented in historical architectural studies like those by Ute Bauer, was a monumental feat of engineering, completed in record time using thousands of workers, including forced laborers. After the war, the towers were so massive and so strong that they were almost impossible to demolish. The Allies tried to blow some of them up, but often succeeded only in damaging them, while the surrounding neighborhoods were wrecked by the blasts. They were built to last, and they did. Today, many of them still stand, silent and imposing. In Vienna, one flak tower now houses the Haus des Meeres public aquarium. In Hamburg, another is being converted into a luxury hotel with a rooftop garden, a strange transformation from a weapon of war to a place of leisure. In Berlin, the ruins of others still loom over public parks. They are a strange and unavoidable part of the urban landscape, a permanent scar from the conflict. The questions they leave behind are powerful. We know the official numbers, but what was the true human toll of the forced labor used to build these towers so quickly? Were there secret military research projects or command centers hidden in the lower levels of the towers that were never documented? And as we repurpose these buildings, turning them into aquariums and hotels, what does it say about our ability to forget, or to live with, the most brutal reminders of the past? Number 14, how do you hold the key to the world? For centuries, the Rock of Gibraltar has been one of the most important strategic locations on Earth. It's a massive limestone promontory at the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea. Whoever controls Gibraltar controls access to that sea. During the Second World War, its importance was greater than ever. It was a critical British naval and air base, a vital link in the Allied supply chain to Malta, Egypt, and the rest of North Africa. The British knew it would be a prime target for attack, so they turned the rock itself into a fortress. While Gibraltar had been tunneled for centuries, most notably during the Great Siege in the 18th century, the war prompted an incredible expansion. A new massive network of tunnels was excavated, creating a secret world inside the rock. This was not just a series of shelters, it was a complete underground city. Over 34 miles of tunnels were dug by the Royal Engineers and Canadian Army Engineers. Inside this labyrinth, there was everything needed to sustain a garrison of 16,000 soldiers for over a year. The underground city had a hospital, power stations, bakeries, water distillation plants, ammunition magazines, and frozen food storage. There were barracks, offices, and command centers. The scale of the operation, known as Operation Tracer, was staggering. A secret observation post was even carved out of the rock on its eastern face, with a small slit looking out over the Mediterranean. The plan was that if Gibraltar were ever captured, a small team of men would be sealed inside this secret chamber to report on enemy ship movements. They had enough supplies to last for 7 years. The chamber was prepared, but never used, and its existence was a secret until the 1990s. The commander of Gibraltar, General Sir Frank Noel Mason MacFarlane, was a key figure, overseeing this transformation and preparing for a potential siege. The story of the tunnels is one of immense engineering skill and foresight. The work was hard and dangerous. The miners, known as tunnel tigers, worked in grueling conditions to create this subterranean fortress. Today, you can tour a large portion of these tunnels. You can see the conditions the soldiers lived in and the complexity of the underground network. You walk through vast rock-hewn chambers that once stored ammunition and see the narrow passages that connected the different parts of the city. It's a powerful testament to the strategic importance of this small piece of land. The preservation efforts have been significant, as documented by heritage groups like the Gibraltar Heritage Trust. But even here, secrets remain. Given the sheer complexity of the tunnel system, are there still sealed-off sections or forgotten chambers that have not been rediscovered? What was the full extent of Operation Tracer, and were there other, similar stay-behind, units planned for other strategic locations? And with military technology constantly evolving, what secrets does the still active military portion of the rock hold today? Number 13, how do you fight a war from under a garden? The island of Malta is a small rocky nation in the middle of the Mediterranean. During the war, it was also one of the most bombed places on Earth. As a British colony, its location was strategically vital. It was a base for Royal Air Force planes and Royal Navy ships to attack supply convoys heading for North Africa. For the Axis powers, Malta was a thorn in their side that had to be eliminated. The island was subjected to a relentless siege and bombing campaign that lasted for over 2 years, from 1940 to 1942. To survive and to command the defense of the island, the British military went underground. They expanded a series of old tunnels built by the Knights of St. John centuries earlier. These tunnels were located deep beneath the Upper Baraka Gardens in the capital city, Valletta. This secret complex became the Lascaris War Rooms. It was the nerve center for all air and sea operations in Malta. From these damp, crowded, and poorly ventilated rooms, the British directed the island's defense. Life in the war rooms was incredibly stressful. They were staffed 24 hours a day by personnel from all branches of the armed forces. They tracked enemy bombing raids on giant map tables, scrambled Spitfire and Hurricane fighters to intercept them, and coordinated naval operations. The air inside was thick with smoke, and the tension was constant. The fate of Malta, and perhaps the entire North African campaign, depended on the decisions made in these cramped underground chambers. General Sir William Dobby, the governor of Malta during the most intense period of the siege, was a deeply religious man who led the defense from here, his resolve becoming legendary. The success of Malta's defense was a major turning point in the war. The island was awarded the George Cross, the highest civilian award for bravery for the heroism of its people. The Lascaris War Rooms played a crucial role in that victory. Later in the war, this same complex was used by General Dwight D. Eisenhower as his advanced Allied headquarters for Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily in 1943. From these same tunnels, the liberation of Italy was planned. After the war rooms were used by NATO for a time, but eventually fell into disuse and were forgotten. They were flooded and vandalized, but in recent years, they have been painstakingly restored and opened to the public as a museum. You can walk through the control rooms, see the original plotting tables and communications equipment, and get a real sense of the claustrophobic and high-stakes environment. It's an incredibly well-preserved piece of history. The Malta Heritage Trust has published extensive research on the restoration process and the historical significance of the site. Yet, some questions are unanswered. How many coded messages sent from the Lascaris War Rooms remain undeciphered in archives, holding details of secret operations? Were there other, even more secret command bunkers on the island that have yet to be found? And what was the full psychological toll on the men and women who worked for years in those stressful, windowless rooms, holding the fate of a nation in their hands. Number 12. Why would you build a secret an empire couldn't keep? In the Ural Mountains of southwestern Poland, a region that was part of Germany during the war, lies one of the most mysterious and sinister construction projects of the entire conflict. It is known as Project Reese, which means Project Giant. It is a vast complex of underground tunnels and bunkers, dug into the solid rock of the mountains by tens of thousands of forced laborers. But to this day, nobody is entirely sure what it was for. The construction began in 1943, a time when Allied air raids were devastating German industry. The project was top secret, overseen by the highest levels of the German command. The scale of the work was immense. 7 huge underground complexes were started. The tunnels are large, some of them over 30 feet high, with arched concrete linings. They were connected by a network of narrow-gauge railway lines. The work was done in horrific conditions. The prisoners from the nearby Gross-Rosen concentration camp system were forced to excavate the tunnels. It is estimated that thousands of them died from exhaustion, malnutrition, and brutality. But the purpose of Project Reese remains a subject of intense debate among historians and researchers. Was it meant to be a new bomb-proof headquarters for the German leadership, a replacement for the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia? Was it intended to be a network of secret underground factories for producing advanced weapons like the V-2 rocket, or even more experimental technologies? Some theories even suggest it was connected to Germany's nuclear research program. The truth is, the project was never finished. As the Soviet army advanced in early 1945, the construction sites were abandoned. The SS guards evacuated and they destroyed much of the documentation relating to the project. Today, parts of the Reese complex are open to tourists. You can take a guided tour into the cold, damp tunnels. You see the vast, empty chambers and the raw, unfinished excavation work. It's a chilling experience, not just because of the mystery, but because of the human cost embedded in the rock itself. It's a monument to a secret that was never completed, and a testament to the suffering of those who were forced to build it. Researchers like Joanna Lamparska have written extensively about the legends and the few known facts surrounding Reese, piecing together fragments of evidence. The unanswered questions are the main story of Project Reese. How much of the tunnel system remains undiscovered, hidden behind collapsed entrances or deliberately flooded sections? What was the ultimate true purpose of this gigantic undertaking? And where are the missing records and blueprints that would finally solve the mystery of what Project Giant was truly meant to be? Number 11, what does it mean to live on a concrete island? The Channel Islands, including Jersey and Guernsey, hold a unique and difficult position in the history of the war. They were the only part of the British Isles to be occupied by German forces. For 5 years, the islanders lived under occupation. And during that time, the islands themselves were transformed. The German command became obsessed with the idea that the British would try to retake the islands. So they turned them into some of the most heavily fortified places on Earth. They became a key part of the Atlantic Wall. Using a massive amount of forced labor, primarily from Eastern Europe, the occupying forces built hundreds of concrete bunkers, gun emplacements, observation towers, and tunnels. The islands, particularly Jersey, are riddled with them. The most impressive and chilling of these is the Jersey War Tunnels, originally known as Holgangsanlage 8. It was designed to be a vast bomb-proof underground hospital and barracks built to protect the garrison from the expected Allied invasion. The tunnels were dug deep into a hillside by thousands of workers living in horrific conditions. Many died during the construction. The tunnel network is over half a mile long. It was a dark, damp, and miserable place to work. After the D-Day landings in Normandy, the strategic importance of the islands plummeted. The Allied forces simply bypassed them. The German garrison and the islanders were left isolated and starving until the war finally ended in May 1945. The underground hospital was never fully completed or used for its intended purpose. Today, the Jersey War tunnels are a world-class museum. The experience is immersive and often harrowing. You walk through the tunnels and see exhibits that tell the story of the occupation from the perspective of the local people. It details the difficult choices they had to make, the acts of resistance, the collaboration, and the daily struggle for survival. It's a powerful and nuanced look at a lesser-known chapter of the war. The work of local historians and the Société Jerseyese has been crucial in preserving these stories and artifacts. But the tunnels and bunkers on Jersey raise difficult questions. We know about the large sites, but how many smaller private bunkers or hidden resistance caches were created by the islanders themselves? What happened to the thousands of forced laborers after the liberation? How many of their individual stories have been lost forever? And as the concrete bunkers slowly crumble and are reclaimed by nature, what is the best way to preserve this difficult heritage without glorifying the immense military effort that created it? Number 10. Did a wall of concrete create a false sense of security? Stretching along the coast of Western Europe from Norway to the Spanish border was one of the most extensive military construction projects in history. It was the Atlantic Wall. It was a chain of coastal defenses bunkers, gun batteries, radar stations, and obstacles built by the German regime between 1942 and 1944. The goal was to defend against an anticipated Allied invasion from the sea. It was meant to be an impenetrable fortress. One of the most powerful and well-preserved examples of this wall is the Battery Tot, located near Calais in France. It's in a strategic position overlooking the narrowest part of the English Channel. The battery consisted of 4 massive concrete casemates, each housing a colossal 380mm naval gun. These guns could fire a shell weighing nearly a ton over a distance of 26 miles, easily reaching the coast of England. Each casemate, known as a term tower, was a fortress in itself, with walls of reinforced concrete over 11 feet thick. Inside these bunkers was a self-contained world for the gun crews. There were ammunition stores, barracks, and machine rooms. The battery was a symbol of the immense industrial and engineering power of the German war machine. It was built using thousands of workers from the Tot organization, a civil and military engineering group that relied heavily on forced labor. The battery was a constant threat to British shipping in the Channel, and was frequently bombed by Allied aircraft, though the massive bunkers were largely immune to damage. But the Atlantic Wall, for all its concrete and steel, had a fatal flaw. It was a thin line, it was strong, but it could be broken. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Allies did not attack at Calais, where the defenses were strongest. They landed in Normandy, further west. While the fighting there was fierce, the main strength of the Atlantic Wall was ultimately bypassed. The wall that was supposed to be impenetrable was breached in a single day. The story of the Atlantic Wall is a lesson in military strategy, often cited in studies like those by military historian Stephen E. Ambrose, showing that static defense lines can create a dangerous and false sense of security. Today, one of the 4 casemates of Battery Tot is a museum, the Musée du Mur de l'Atlantique. You can go inside the massive concrete structure and see one of the last surviving K5 railway guns on display outside. The sheer scale of the bunker is hard to comprehend. You can stand where the giant gun once stood and look out over the channel. The coastline all around is still dotted with the remains of hundreds of other bunkers, slowly sinking into the sand. The questions that remain are vast. How many tons of unexploded ordnance from Allied bombing raids still lie buried around these major battery sites? The full records of the forced laborers who died building the wall were often destroyed or lost. Could their true numbers ever be known? And how much of the wall's vast communication and tunnel network remains undiscovered, buried under the shifting sands of the European coastline? Number 9. Could a concrete dome have changed the war? Near the town of Saint-Omer, in northern France, stands a structure so strange and immense. It looks alien. It is a massive concrete dome rising out of the countryside. This is La Coupole, the dome. It was one of the most secret and ambitious construction projects undertaken by the German regime during the war. It was built to be a launch site for the V-2 rocket, one of the world's first ballistic missiles. This was a wonder weapon that was meant to turn the tide of the war by raining down destruction on London and other Allied cities. The construction began in 1943 under the utmost secrecy. The dome itself is a concrete shell 170 feet in diameter and 17 feet thick, weighing over 55,000 tons. It was designed to protect the missile preparation facility beneath it from Allied bombing. The plan was to store, fuel, and prepare the V-2 rockets in a network of tunnels dug into the chalk hillside underneath the dome. They would then be brought up to the surface to be launched. It was intended to be a rocket factory and launch pad combined, capable of firing dozens of missiles at London every day. The construction was done by thousands of forced laborers, mainly French prisoners and conscripts, as well as skilled German specialists. The Allies quickly became aware of this mysterious construction site through aerial reconnaissance and reports from the French resistance. They didn't know its exact purpose, but they knew it was important. They began a relentless bombing campaign against it. The massive dome itself was too strong to be destroyed by conventional bombs, but in July 1944, the Royal Air Force used new 5-ton tallboy earthquake bombs. These bombs didn't need to hit the dome directly. They penetrated deep into the ground before exploding, creating a massive shockwave that destabilized the chalk hillside and wrecked the tunnel system. The damage was so severe that the site had to be abandoned. The V-2 rockets were later launched from mobile sites, which were much harder to target, but they never achieved the sustained, overwhelming bombardment that was planned for La Coupole. The failure to complete this and similar V-weapon bunkers was a significant strategic setback. Historians like Michael J. Neufeld, in his book on the V-2, have argued that if these super bunkers had become operational, they could have significantly altered the course of the war. Today, La Coupole is a fascinating and chilling museum and history center. You enter through the original tunnels and take an elevator up into the vast space under the dome. The exhibits tell the story of the V-weapons, the occupation of France, and the dawn of the space race, as many of the scientists who developed the V-2 later went on to work for the American and Soviet space programs. But the dome leaves behind many questions. Were there plans for even larger, more advanced secret weapon facilities that were never even started? How much of the V-2 program's scientific and engineering data was captured by the Allies, and how much of it remains classified? And what was the fate of the thousands of forced laborers who worked on the site after it was abandoned? Number 8. Can a perfect defense lead to a perfect defeat? Before the Second World War began, France was haunted by the memory of the First. The trench warfare had been devastating. The leadership was determined to never let it happen again. Their solution was one of the most elaborate and expensive defensive systems ever built, the Maginot Line. It was a continuous line of concrete fortifications, bunkers, anti-tank obstacles, and machine gun posts that stretched along France's border with Germany. It was a technological marvel. The largest fort in the line was Fort Hackenberg, near the town of Vercors. It was not just a fort, it was a massive underground city. It consisted of 2 main combat blocks connected by miles of tunnels deep underground. An electric railway shuttled troops and ammunition between the different parts of the fort. It had its own power station, barracks for over 1,000 men, a hospital, kitchens, and sophisticated air filtration systems. On the surface, its retractable gun turrets could rise out of the ground, fire, and then disappear again. It was considered to be completely impenetrable. The soldiers stationed in the Maginot Line lived in a strange, subterranean world. The conditions were clean and relatively safe, but it was a life without sunlight, disconnected from the outside world. The French public put immense faith in the line. It was a symbol of security, a concrete guarantee that there would be no repeat of the last war's invasion. The engineering and planning behind it were immense, a topic detailed in books like The Maginot Line by Julian Jackson. But the Maginot Line had a fatal flaw. It was static, and it did not cover the border with Belgium through the Ardennes forest, which was considered too dense for a major armored attack. In May 1940, the German army did the unthinkable. They did not attack the Maginot Line directly. They simply went around it. Their panzer divisions swept through the Ardennes, outflanked the line, and poured into France. The impenetrable fortress was rendered useless without a single major battle. The garrisons in the forts, including Hackenberg, were cut off and eventually forced to surrender. It was a catastrophic failure of military strategy. Today, Fort Hackenberg is incredibly well preserved and open for tours. You can ride the original electric train through the cold, echoing tunnels. You can visit the barracks, the power station, and see the giant gun turrets in action. It's like stepping back in time. It is both an impressive feat of engineering and a tragic monument to a flawed strategy. It shows that the strongest walls are useless if your enemy simply chooses to walk around them. The questions that the Maginot Line leaves us with are about more than just military tactics. How did such a massive strategic blunder become the central pillar of a nation's defense policy? What was the psychological effect on the French soldiers who had to surrender their impenetrable fortresses without a fight? And are there still forgotten sections of the line, smaller bunkers and observation posts, that have been completely reclaimed by nature, their existence unrecorded? Number 7, how do you hide a monster of the deep? During the Battle of the Atlantic, German U-boats, or submarines, were a deadly threat to Allied shipping. They hunted in wolf packs and sank millions of tons of supplies, but they were vulnerable. When they were in port for repairs, refueling, and rearming, they were sitting ducks for Allied bombers. To protect these vital assets, the German Navy embarked on a colossal building program, the construction of massive bomb-proof submarine pens. One of the largest and most famous of these is the Valentine submarine pen in Bremen, Germany. It is a gigantic monolithic structure of reinforced concrete. The numbers are staggering. It is nearly a quarter of a mile long. Its roof is up to 23 feet thick. The construction, which began in 1943, required over 1 million tons of concrete. It was designed to be a submarine factory. The plan was to mass-produce a new type of advanced U-boat, the Type X-9, in an assembly line process completely safe from air attack. The human cost of building this monster was immense. Thousands of forced laborers from concentration camps, prisoners of war, and civilian conscripts were used. They worked in appalling conditions, and it is estimated that over 1,600 of them died. It was a race against time as the German war effort became more and more desperate. As with La Coupole, the Allies were aware of the construction and repeatedly bombed the site. For a long time, the bombs had little effect on the massive structure. But in March 1945, just weeks before the war in Europe ended, the Royal Air Force used their new 10-ton Grand Slam earthquake bombs. 2 of these massive bombs hit the Valentine pen, punching huge holes in the thick roof and causing sections to collapse. The damage was so severe that the project was abandoned. The pen was never used for its intended purpose. Not a single submarine was ever produced there. It stands today as a massive, unfinished monument to the brutal realities of total war sick, a feat of engineering built on human suffering, designed to produce weapons of destruction but ultimately defeated from the air. The documentation center at the site, as detailed in research by German historical societies, now focuses on the history of the forced laborers, ensuring their story is not forgotten. Today, you can visit the Valentine Pen. It is a memorial in a public space. Walking alongside and inside the structure is an overwhelming experience. The sheer scale is difficult to process. It feels less like a building and more like a man-made mountain range. The holes from the Grand Slam bombs are still visible in the roof. It is a stark reminder of the immense resources poured into the conflict. The questions it raises are profound. How many of the individual victims who died building this structure can ever be identified? Were there secret design elements or technologies planned for the Type WWII submarines that were to be built here, with records that were lost or destroyed at the end of the war? And as this concrete giant slowly ages, what does its presence tell us about the relationship between technological ambition and human cruelty? Number 6, where did evil go on vacation? In the Bavarian Alps, there is a mountain called the Obersalzberg. It offers breathtaking views and pristine air. It was also the spiritual and ideological center of the German regime, second only to Berlin. Adolf Hitler had a deep personal connection to this place. He first visited in the 1920s and later bought a small house there, which he expanded into a large residence called the Berghof. Soon, other high-ranking officials built homes nearby. The entire mountain was sealed off, becoming a heavily guarded exclusive zone. But the real secret of the Obersalzberg was underground. As the war progressed and the danger of air raids increased, a vast and complex system of bunkers and tunnels was built beneath the Berghof and the surrounding buildings. It was a labyrinth of passages, offices, living quarters, and command centers. The system was extensive and luxurious, especially Hitler's personal section. It had marble-floored corridors, wood-paneled rooms, and sophisticated ventilation systems. It was a subterranean reflection of the power and paranoia of the regime's leadership. The Obersalzberg was where many key decisions of the war were made. Visiting dignitaries were entertained at the Berghof, with its famous large picture window overlooking the Alps. It was a place of both political theater and real power. But as the war turned, it became more of a fortress. The bunker system was continually expanded, designed to allow the leadership to survive and continue to govern even if the surface was completely destroyed. The history of this place, as documented in works like Hitler's Alpine Headquarters by James Wilson, reveals the strange mix of idyllic mountain life and genocidal planning. In April 1945, just days before the end of the war in Europe, the Royal Air Force launched a massive bombing raid on the Obersalzberg. The Berghof and many of the other buildings were destroyed. The retreating SS troops set fire to the ruins. American and French soldiers were the first to arrive, and they looted what was left. After the war, the Bavarian government, wanting to prevent the site from becoming a shrine, eventually demolished the remaining ruins of the major buildings. Today, the Obersalzberg is a tourist destination again, but one with a heavy history. A documentation center has been built on the site, providing a sober and detailed account of what happened there. You can also visit a small part of the original bunker system. You walk through the cold, bare concrete tunnels. The contrast between the surviving, rough-hewn bunkers and the historical photos of the luxurious Berghof is jarring. It's a reminder that, like, beneath the surface of power and spectacle lay a deep fortified fear. The mysteries of the Obersalzberg have not all been solved. How extensive is the tunnel system really? Rumors and local legends persist of undiscovered sections filled with stolen art or secret archives. What was the full extent of the military and scientific research that may have taken place in the more secret parts of the complex? And how did the ordinary people who worked on the mountain, the cooks, the cleaners, the guards, reconcile the beautiful surroundings with the horrific ideology being planned all around them? Number 5. Could a forest hide the heart of a war machine? In a dense, marshy forest in what is now northeastern Poland lie the crumbling remains of one of the most infamous places of the Second World War. This was the Wolf's Lair, or Wolfschanz. It was Adolf Hitler's primary military headquarters on the Eastern Front. From this secret, heavily guarded complex, he directed the war in the Soviet Union and made decisions that affected millions of lives. The location was chosen for its remoteness and its dense forest cover, which helped to hide it from aerial reconnaissance. The Wolf's Lair was not a single bunker, but a sprawling complex of over 80 buildings and massive concrete bunkers. It was a high-security village hidden in the woods. It had its own power station, a railway line, and 2 airfields. The bunkers were enormous, with walls and roofs up to 26 feet thick. They were covered with camouflage netting, and even had trees and shrubs planted on their roofs to blend in with the forest. The entire complex was surrounded by minefields and barbed wire fences. Life inside the Wolf's Lair was strange and isolating. Hitler and his staff lived in a humid, mosquito-infested environment shrouded in secrecy and paranoia. It was from here that some of the most brutal orders of the war were issued. The atmosphere was tense and claustrophobic. The complex is perhaps most famous as the site of the 20 July 1944 assassination attempt. A group of German army officers, led by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, tried to kill Hitler by planting a bomb in a briefcase during a staff meeting. The bomb exploded, but Hitler survived. The aftermath was a brutal purge of anyone suspected of being involved. This event is meticulously detailed in many historical accounts, including Peter Hoffmann's The History of the German Resistance. In late 1944, as the Soviet army advanced, Hitler abandoned the Wolf's Lair for the last time. As the German forces retreated, they tried to destroy the complex. They used tons of explosives, but the bunkers were so massive that they were only partially destroyed. The explosions shattered them but did not obliterate them. Today, the ruins of the Wolf's Lair are a tourist attraction. You can walk through the forest and see the colossal, shattered blocks of concrete. The scale is hard to believe. They look like the ruins of an ancient brutalist civilization. The air is still, and the forest is slowly reclaiming the site. It is a deeply unsettling place, a physical manifestation of a destructive ideology, now left to crumble in a quiet Polish forest. But what secrets does it still hold? Despite extensive clearing, the surrounding forests are still believed to contain undiscovered minefields and lost military equipment. Were there other smaller command posts or secret communication hubs in the area that have never been located? And what classified documents from the Wolf's Lair were successfully evacuated? And what might they tell us about the inner workings of the high command that we still don't know? Number 4. How did a quiet country house win the war? In the heart of Buckinghamshire, England, there's a large Victorian mansion called Bletchley Park. To a casual observer during the war, it looked like just another country estate, perhaps being used by the military for some mundane administrative purpose. But in reality, it was the location of one of the most important and secret operations of the entire war. Bletchley Park was the central site for British code breaking. It was here that a team of brilliant minds, including mathematicians, linguists, and chess champions, worked to break the secret codes used by the German military. The most famous of these was the Enigma code. The German military believed their Enigma machines, which used a complex system of rotating wheels to encrypt messages, produced a code that was unbreakable. But the code breakers at Bletchley Park, building on pioneering work by Polish cryptanalysts, figured out how to crack it. The intelligence they gained from these decrypted messages, codenamed Ultra, was invaluable. It gave the Allies unprecedented insight into enemy plans, troop movements, and strategic thinking. Bletchley Park was a secret factory for intelligence. Thousands of people worked there in shifts, 24 hours a day, in a collection of hastily built wooden huts. The work was secret and highly compartmentalized. People working in one hut had no idea what was happening in the next. The most famous figure associated with Bletchley Park is Alan Turing, a mathematical genius who was instrumental in developing the bomb, an electromechanical device that dramatically sped up the process of breaking the daily Enigma keys. What his work and the work of thousands of others, many of them women, was crucial to the Allied victory. Many historians, including Sir Harry Hinsley, who worked there, have argued that the intelligence from Bletchley Park shortened the war by at least 2 years, saving countless lives. The secrecy surrounding Bletchley Park was absolute. Everyone who worked there signed an official secrets act, forbidding them from ever speaking about their work. This oath was so effective that the full story of Bletchley Park did not begin to emerge until the 1970s. For decades, the people who had played such a vital role in winning the war could not tell anyone, not even their families, what they had done. Today, Bletchley Park is a museum. You can visit the mansion, see the reconstructed huts, and marvel at a working replica of the bombing machine. It's a tribute to the intellectual power that was a key weapon of the war. It's a different kind of bunker, not one of concrete and steel, but one of intellect and secrecy. The enemy was not bombs, but the seemingly unbreakable codes of the enemy. The questions that remain are fascinating. What other less famous codes were broken at Bletchley Park, and what secrets did they reveal that are still considered too sensitive to declassify? What was the full personal cost for the codebreakers who had to carry the burden of their secret work for their entire lives? And were there any security breaches at Bletchley Park that have never been made public? Number 3. What lies beneath England's oldest castle? Dover Castle stands on the famous White Cliffs, overlooking the English Channel. It has been called the Key to England for centuries, a fortress that has guarded the nation's shores since Roman times. During the Second World War, its strategic importance became greater than ever, but the real command center was not in the ancient keep on the surface. It was deep inside the cliffs themselves, in a secret network of tunnels. The tunnels under Dover Castle were first dug during the Napoleonic Wars in the late 18th century to be used as barracks. During the Second World War, they were dramatically expanded and modernized. They became the naval headquarters that controlled the Dover Strait, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. From a command center deep within the chalk cliffs, Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay orchestrated one of the most astonishing operations of the war, Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of over 338,000 Allied soldiers from the beaches of Dunkirk in 1940. The tunnels were a hive of activity. They included a telephone exchange, a hospital, offices, and command posts. From these secret bomb-proof rooms, the Royal Navy directed convoys, coordinated air-sea rescue operations, and monitored enemy movements. The conditions were cramped and difficult, but the work done here was absolutely vital to the war effort. The success of the Dunkirk evacuation, planned and executed from these tunnels, was a huge morale boost for Britain at a very dark time. Later in the war, the tunnels served as a command center for deception operations related to the D-Day landings. The Allies created a fictional 1st U.S. Army Group in the Dover area to convince the German command that the main invasion of Europe would come at Calais, not Normandy. The radio traffic and signals for this ghost army were broadcast from the tunnels under Dover Castle, a key part of one of the most successful deceptions in military history. The story of these operations has been detailed in many historical accounts of military intelligence, such as those by author Ben McIntyre. Today, you can tour the secret wartime tunnels at Dover Castle. The experience is brought to life with projections and soundscapes that recreate the atmosphere of the Dunkirk evacuation. You can see the command posts, the hospital, and the communication rooms, all left as they were. It's a journey deep into the rock and deep into a pivotal moment of history. But the chalk cliffs of Dover still hold their secrets. The full extent of the tunnel network is vast, and it is likely that there are still sealed off or unmapped sections. What other top-secret plans or deception operations were hatched in these tunnels that have never come to light? And how many personal diaries, letters, or unofficial records from the men and women who worked here are still out there waiting to add a new dimension to the story of the key to England? Number 2, can a diary change the world? On a canal in Amsterdam, there is an ordinary-looking 17th century house. For 2 years, it held one of the most famous secrets of the war. This was the hiding place of Anne Frank, her family, and 4 other Jewish people. They were hiding from the German occupying forces and their policy of deporting the Jewish population to concentration camps in the east. Their refuge was a small, hidden set of rooms at the back of the building, which was Anne's father's office. It was called the Secret Annex. The entrance was concealed behind a movable bookcase. For 761 days, the 8 people lived in this cramped space in constant fear of discovery. They had to remain silent during the day while workers were in the offices below. They could not flush the toilet or run water. They relied completely on a small group of brave helpers, including Miepkes, who risked their own lives to bring them food, supplies, and news of the outside world. During her time in hiding, the young Anne Frank kept a diary. She wrote with incredible honesty, insight, and humor about her life in the annex, her relationships with her family, her fears, and her dreams for the future. Her diary is not a historical document of battles and strategies. It is a deeply personal account of a young life lived under extreme circumstances. It gives a human face to the millions who suffered during this period. In August 1944, the hiding place was betrayed. The German security police raided the annex and arrested everyone. They were sent to concentration camps. Of the 8 people who hid in the annex, only Anne's father, Otto Frank, survived the war. After the war, he returned to Amsterdam and was given Anne's diary, which had been saved by Miepkes. He decided to publish it, fulfilling his daughter's wish to become a writer. The Diary of a Young Girl has since been translated into dozens of languages and has become one of the most widely read books in the world. Today, the house on the Prinsengracht is the Anne Frank House, a museum. You can walk through the office building, push aside the bookcase, and go up the steep stairs into the secret annex. The rooms are kept unfurnished at Otto Frank's request to emphasize the emptiness and the loss. It is an incredibly powerful and moving experience. You stand in the small rooms where a young girl wrote a diary that would become a universal symbol of hope, resilience, and the human cost of hatred. The story of the secret annex is known around the world, but a central mystery remains. Who betrayed the people in hiding? For decades, there have been investigations and theories, but no one has ever been definitively identified. A recent cold case investigation published a new theory in 2022, but it has been met with significant criticism from historians. Will we ever know the truth? Are there other similar diaries from people in hiding that were lost or destroyed, their powerful personal stories gone forever? And how many other secret annexes were there across occupied Europe that successfully kept their secrets, allowing their inhabitants to survive the war? Number 1, where was the war won? Deep beneath the streets of Westminster in London, just a short walk from 10 Downing Street, lies a cramped underground complex of rooms that was the secret heart of the British war effort. These are the Churchill War Rooms. During the Second World War, this basement office complex was the British government's command center. From here, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and his cabinet directed the course of the war. The war rooms were set up just before the war began in 1939, and they were designed to protect the government's leadership from the German bombing raids that were expected to devastate London. The complex was reinforced with a thick layer of concrete known as the slab. It was a secret, self-contained world. It had a cabinet room, a map room, a transatlantic telephone room for secure conversations with the U.S. president, and small, Spartan bedrooms for key staff, including Churchill and his wife. Life in the war rooms was claustrophobic and intense. The air was thick with stale cigar smoke. There was no natural light. Staff worked and slept there, sometimes for weeks on end. During the height of the Blitz, the map room was the operational hub, staffed 24 hours a day. On its giant maps, every detail of the war at sea, on land, and in the air was tracked with pins and colored string. It was from these rooms that Churchill delivered some of his most famous morale-boosting radio speeches. It was here that the Battle of Britain was directed, the Battle of the Atlantic was fought, and the D-Day landings were planned. The historian Andrew Roberts, in his biography Churchill Walking with Destiny, emphasizes how this underground bunker became a physical extension of Churchill's own relentless drive and determination. The war rooms were in constant use until the surrender of Japan in August 1945. When the war ended, the lights were turned off, the doors were locked, and the site was simply abandoned. It remained untouched, a perfect time capsule for decades. It was eventually opened to the public as a museum in the 1980s. Visiting the Churchill War Rooms today is an extraordinary experience. You walk through the same narrow corridors and into the same rooms where the fate of the world was decided. The map room is left exactly as it was on the day the lights were switched off in 1945. The pins are still in the maps. The clocks are still on the wall. You can see Churchill's small bedroom, complete with the chamber pot he kept under his bed. It feels as if the occupants have just stepped out for a moment. It is one of the most perfectly preserved historical sites in the world. Yet, even in this well-documented place, questions linger. The war rooms were just one part of a larger network of secret government bunkers in London. What was the full extent of this network, and are there still forgotten tunnels or chambers beneath the city? What highly sensitive conversations took place in the transatlantic telephone room that were never transcribed and whose contents are lost to history? And perhaps the most human question of all, what was the true long-term psychological impact on the men and women who spent years working under constant pressure, deep underground, with the weight of a nation on their shoulders?